Welcome to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by Auto Value and Bumper to Bumper and TireRack.com. Here's your MotorWeek podcast host, John Davis.
Thank you, Alec Webb. Welcome, everyone, to MotorWeek podcast number 312. I am indeed John Davis, your host. Hey, today's podcast, we are going to cover 3 automotive game changers. First up, we recently went to Barcelona, Spain to drive Volvo's newest, smallest, and cheapest EV yet, the EX30, starting around $35,000. Then we had some real seat time in Chevy's hybrid C8 Corvette, the long-awaited E-Ray. Following up, our first ever RAM REV is the Ram 1500 Ramcharger EV. It's an EV with a difference, an extended range EV, full-size pickup. We'll explain a lot more as we get into it. Plus, we've got a lightning round on some big problems for robotaxi company Cruise and a viewer question about if EVs need special wheels and tires. And to answer all of these subjects, we've got a very intimate group on the podcast today. Two-wheeling reporter Brian Robinson.
Yeah, I can't answer all of those topics, but
Sure you can. Just give it a try. I've heard you do it. Digital producer Jessica Ray.
Hey, everyone.
All right, we're going to get right into it. There's a very clear lack of affordable EVs on the new car market today. All you have to read is all the articles complaining about the high cost of EVs. Some automakers have promised them, but they've yet to deliver because largely the battery prices have not come down like expected. Well, Volvo, who is going all in on EVs, has introduced a new small EV that starts at a digestible $35,000. And Jessica, you and I recently had some time in it. You more so than me. You went all the way over to Barcelona. Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, I mean, I when the EX30 was revealed a few months ago, on paper, I thought this is like the next big thing. It really is. And then when I drove it, when I went out to Spain to drive it, that pretty much was like affirmative. It is the next big EV.
Now, you say big EV. It's actually small,
yes.
But it's bigger inside. I was surprised how roomy inside it felt. So it's a true 5-passenger.
For sure. And I guess you would maybe call it subcompact technically. It kind of fits in a size that we don't really provide here in the U.S. for EVs. This kind of competes with the Volkswagen ID3, right? Something of that size, which keep in mind.
It's interesting because I felt that it was bigger than that in the limited time I had. Well, you know what I mean. It feels like a bigger vehicle once you're driving it than it actually is.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would say so it's actually very similar in size to a Bolt EUV, except the thing is it's like a foot wider. So it kind of keeps the same wide dimensions of the XC40 Recharge and the C40, whereas like something like the Bolt might have similar length and width, but it's a more narrow vehicle because it's in that that is truly more of a subcompact. So this kind of like is on the cusp of it. But it drives fantastic. There's 2 different models. I don't know which one that you drove, John, but I was able to drive both the single motor rear wheel drive version and the dual motor all-wheel drive version. Now the dual motor has like 422 horsepower.
Yeah, we were driving the single motor.
Is a lot. Now the single motor takes us a little bit back down to earth with 268 horsepower.
But that's a lot for a small vehicle.
Yes, it is. But one of the things that I felt it did much better than, say, the XC40 Recharge or the C40, which is kind of a step up in classification in size, is that it wasn't quite as punchy in like a good way. Like these are 2 relatively pretty powerful vehicles, but the way that it modulated the power when you put your foot on the accelerator was incredibly comfortable, and it was less EV-like. It was less like on-off.
Right.
It was way more gradual, which was kind of like the first note to me that, okay, this is for a first-time EV buyer. This is for somebody who's buying an EV because they're not necessarily like, oh, I love EVs and I love Teslas and one pedal drive, yada yada. They're buying this because they want to move toward electrification and it's affordable.
I actually felt the same way about the regenerative braking.
Correct. Yes.
I didn't feel like it was grabbing me and pushing me forward every time I lifted off the accelerator.
It was actually, so the way that Volvo works is they have what's considered one pedal drive, which for EVs is quite literally you don't have to use the brake because the regenerative braking is so strong that when you are driving at really, for the most part, lower speeds, you could come to a stoplight without ever actually having to touch the brake pedal. Now, with the EX30, like I said, you have the 2 regenerative braking settings, one pedal drive or not. And not is you just kind of cruise,
right?
And it feels
and you're not putting a lot of power back into the battery.
Correct. So. But with the one pedal drive, it's close. It's close. Like it'll come to a complete stop, but you'd have to give like a ton of lead time. I thought it was better than others that I think it's better at recouping energy than others that I have driven that aren't exactly one pedal. But it definitely is not like super duper strong.
No, but as you're coasting down,
I think that's actually a good thing.
I do too. I'm not a huge fan of promoting one pedal driving. I don't want people to have their brake pedal, go unused. But as you would coast down, you didn't feel like you had to jump on the brake pedal. You just sort of had to ease it down that last couple of hundred feet to the stop sign or stoplight.
Yes, and so it felt. So I really liked that implementation of it. We should talk about range, John.
Yes.
I mean, so for the rear-wheel drive version, up to 275 miles
Which
of
is a lot for a small vehicle with a relatively small battery.
Yes, I got a 69 kilowatt-hour battery. I believe it's only usable up to 64 kilowatt-hours. But the all-wheel drive only goes down 10 miles. Yeah. So that's 265 miles, which is, I think, pretty competitive in that price point and size.
And when you get inside of it, it's very Scandinavian modern.
Correct.
Nice materials, nothing flashy. It does remind me a little of the interior choices that the Volkswagen has used on the ID4. Nice fabrics, rich looking without being opulent, and of course everything in there was eco-friendly, but comfortable. The way that most Volvos feel, most people feel about Volvos. This is a comfortable car.
Absolutely. So, and a lot of it's made with recyclable materials. They're very much, Volvo specifically is into sustainability when it comes to the interiors of their car. Well, actually just everything that has to do with their EVs, they're focused on sustainability. So they use like recycled denim. They use like recycled plastics. So they have some very like cool, quirky interiors that are actually, like John said, are very comfortable. But it's also has that Scandinavian minimalism, which is kind of like good, but at the same time, we have one central display as our screen.
Yeah.
And that is it. There is no speedometer in front of your face.
It's a real throwback to right after World War II when you used to have a number of small European cars coming out with, like the Mini Cooper, with a central speedometer so they could move the steering wheel from one side to the next depending on where they were going to sell it, but they didn't have to redesign the whole dash.
Yeah, so for this, all the controls are within a touchscreen. That it's very Tesla-like. Yeah. Now, there is a reason for that. Part of it's cost. It's very cheap to do that, absolutely. But at the same time, there's other instances where it's super simplified. Like, for example, the audio. So there is one sound bar that is across the dash, and that is it. There's no speakers in the doors at all. There's no, the window
regulators.
The window regulators, they're not in the doors either. There's nothing in the doors other than power locks.
So you can see this was built to a price.
Yes, this is built to a price of just under $35,000 MSRP with delivery, that'll be like a little over $36,000.
Can you take the doors off then?
I wish. I know it's very Jeepy.
and there's something else going on here. Another thing that makes the price remarkable is that it's built in China. And there is a 25% tariff on Chinese-built vehicles coming into the U.S.
Correct. And they say they're not losing money on this, which I don't know.
Have they announced the all-wheel drive price?
Yes, all-wheel drive starts at about 46.
So that's a big jump. That's a 10 grand jump.
Because there is no base. So there's three trim levels: Core, Plus, and Ultra. And so there's only a Plus and Ultra on the dual motor version.
Right.
So to me, that base Core model, I mean, it has a heat pump. It's got a ton of standard features. Got some safety sensors, wireless Apple CarPlay. I mean, that to me is a bargain EV for sure.
I mean, if you're just looking to get into an electric vehicle and you don't have to have all-wheel drive, it's a great way to start.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there's a lot that you can do with just a rear-wheel drive vehicle. So I think, if you really don't need all-wheel drive, the single motor is absolutely the way to go.
And folks, if you've forgotten how to drive a rear-wheel drive vehicle in snow, it's time to go back to school. And remember, this thing's pretty heavy, so you've got a lot of weight in your favor.
Yeah. And while you mentioned, John, it's built in China. They are expanding production. They will also build it in Ghent. They're also thinking about possibly building it here in the U.S.
I mean, they've got a Charleston plant that's very underutilized. Brian Robinson, we kind of left you out of this conversation. But you've seen the pictures, you've read about it.
Yeah,
what's your impression? We're pretty euphoric about it over here.
Yeah, just from listening to you guys, comment on how it drives. Less like an EV and more like a Volvo. I think if you're Volvo and you're going to tell your customers they're no longer going to be able to buy a gas engine vehicle, you need to make the EV ones as close to those as you can to give them a reason to move to it. So I think that's probably a good call on their part.
Yeah, I was toying around waiting for the new Mini SE, which is also going to be initially made over in China, and they're right now not going to bring it to the U.S. because of price. But if Volvo can do this, geez, Mini, why can't you?
I know.
They're the good thing is maybe they'll end up building the Mini here as well, and probably even in England. But anyway, a good starter EV. I think both Jessica and I were very impressed about it. I was extremely impressed with just the driving.
People might, I think the last thing I'll say on it is because it's built in China, it's not eligible for the federal tax credit if you buy it.
Correct, right. But that's where the loophole comes in.
Yes, there is a leasing loophole.
Oh, if you lease it, then they'll give you some of that money.
Up to 75. It can be up to 7,500. Volvo's taking advantage of that.
If you are new to the EV market and you've heard about these government tax subsidies, and some of them are actually available on the state level as well. Correct. The federal subsidies have all sorts of restrictions built into them about where the vehicle is sourced and where the battery is sourced. However, companies like Mercedes-Benz and Hyundai and Kia have discovered there is a loophole that where their vehicles don't qualify if you buy it, they do qualify if you lease it.
Yeah.
And frankly, I tell most folks leasing an EV is probably smart anyway because the technology is changing so rapidly. In 3 years, you may want something different.
And this is kind of like a starter car. Yeah. This is I think this is like the perfect little EV to lease, absolutely.
Now let's move on to an EV that doesn't really fit any of the parameters that we've just been talking about.
Is it an EV?
It is an EV of sorts. The Corvette C8, the latest generation and evolution of the Corvette. For the first time ever, as everyone probably knows, they put the engine behind the driver in the mid-engine configuration. Well, now the Corvette is evolving even further. We've been hearing about the so-called electrified Corvette for, it seems like, forever. Some are calling it a hybrid. It's called the E-Ray. And I actually had a chance to spend about a half an hour in one. And I have to tell you, it's a fascinating car. you still have the 6.2-liter V8, but there's also now a new electric motor that powers just the front wheels, and it has an 8-speed DCT transmission, manual automatic, as we like to say. That front motor is 160 horsepower, and there's a small 1.1 kilowatt-hour battery that's nestled inside the center tunnel inside the interior, so no extra space was taken up. The end result of all this is 655 horsepower, a 0 to 60 of 2.5 seconds and about a 10.5 second quarter mile. But if you think somehow this improves the fuel economy of the Corvette, think again. Your combined city highway is 19 combined, city is 16, 24 highway. This is taking electrification for pure performance to move the Corvette to the next level. And a couple things worth noting about it. You have a 5-mile range when it is operating in EV-only mode, which is called stealth mode, which is primarily there so you can get away from a stoplight or you're home early in the morning without waking up all the neighbors. And as you put your foot into it, when you reach towards that maximum 160 horsepower output of the front electric motor, then the gas engine cranks up. And at that point, it is no longer a typical hybrid. It does not switch back and forth to only electric or only gas. It uses the electric for additional acceleration, for handling purposes, but it's not your typical hybrid after that. It is a performance hybrid to the max. And by the way, there's no plug to plug it in. Regen braking or using some engine charge is how you top off the battery. Has a different displays on the inside. Otherwise, it's very much a C8 Corvette. It was a blast to drive, and I didn't get to drive it very fast, but I did spend as much time as possible in stealth mode, which I think operates up to about 45 miles an hour.
Front-wheel drive Corvette. Thank you, GM. Way to go.
Only for that first 5 miles or 45.
A lot of people have been clamoring for that.
Well, we haven't driven it on the track, but talking to the engineers and the few people that have driven it at speed, they say it really does improve handling. Reminds me really of the NSX.
Right, that's what I was going to bring up.
Why don't you mention?
Well, you know more about that one than me, but that one had more than one motor up front. Right?
I believe it had two.
And you could definitely feel
because it did each wheel up front. I think had its own propulsion.
Yeah. So obviously Acura loves doing that type of handling through technology, and it definitely worked in the NSX. It'll be interesting to see what it's like in the Corvette.
Yeah,
sure.
I kind of hope we get a chance to put one on the racetrack before too much longer.
Yeah.
Any other comments?
No, I mean,
if you have a chance to see, or even if you a rare chance to get in an E-Ray, you got to do it.
It looks cool.
It looks cool.
I think it sounds cool too. I mean, was there a different sound to it, John?
I didn't think so. In stealth mode, you hear a little bit of electric whine, but it's very minor. I mean, it's way up there, and you're well encased in that cockpit. You do have a lot of displays that show you when the power is being applied, peaks and valleys, and everything that you could possibly imagine that they could add to an already very comprehensive performance data readout is there to let you know what the front electric motor is contributing to your progress. So cool. Interesting. Why did they do it? Well, I think we're seeing it from Lamborghini, from Ferrari, and others. They want to get into the electric game, but they don't want to abandon their heritage.
Well, I think I like the idea of using electric motors for performance hybrids. I think that's a cool way to show off what electrification can do. We're not just looking necessarily for efficiency, but what can it do on the performance end? I think that's just as important.
And when you think about it, all the anti-skid systems, they mostly all work by taking power away from front wheels or rear wheels to make you handle better. And here's the situation of when you're in a corner and you need a little extra power to get you through that corner smoothly, you've got it on tap where it needs to be.
Right.
So, interesting.
Nice.
Very interesting vehicle. Before we move on to our lightning round, I want to pause just a second to mention our valued sponsors, Auto Value and Bumper to Bumper and TireRack.com. They really make our television series and our podcast, MotorWeek, possible. We hope you will basically have an opportunity to take advantages of their services. We know that all of our listeners and viewers appreciate the support of Auto Value and Bumper to Bumper and Tire Rack to each and every episode of Motor Week. Thank you, folks, very much. Okay, our next on the agenda, and this is something that's grabbed a couple of headlines. Our lightning round, we're going to focus back on autonomous driving, which we really haven't talked about very much in recent podcasts because it's sort of faded a little bit from the headlines. And one of the reasons is what this story is all about. Cruise, which if you don't know is the General Motors-backed robotaxi company that's been operating primarily in San Francisco, has suspended all of their operations across the U.S., and California's even revoked their license after one of their driverless vehicles struck and pinned down a pedestrian who had already been hit by a human-driven vehicle, and this did take place in San Francisco. The company also went viral recently after video showed a number of their driverless robotaxis creating traffic jams. Is this a sign that we are not ready for fully autonomous technology?
This is like Terminator coming true. It's like,
A little bit.
Did
like,
we
who
need more?
didn't- Yeah, it's like who didn't see this coming? I mean, it's the amount of money and man hours and time being spent on this technology. I'm not going to say it's a waste because something good may come out of it, but there's better things we could be spending our money on, I think. But yeah, obviously they're going to have glitches. Hopefully this is the worst glitch that comes about.
We've all recognized that some of the new features like lane keep assist and so forth in newer cars were all technologies that needed to be developed so that autonomous driving would be practical. But the full autonomous driving depends too much, well, is at the mercy, shall we say, of human drivers who may do everything unexpected. I even know for a fact that there are certain human-driven taxi drivers in some of the big cities that have gone out of their way to kind of confuse some of the robo-taxis, or at least that's what they claim. And it's easy to do by doing things like getting too close to them intentionally to force them over to the curb. So I'm not surprised this has happened. You haven't said anything, Jess.
Well, I think that a lot of people don't realize that driving in cities, this is the hardest part of developing autonomous systems. This, like, there's such...
Well, explain that. Why is that?
There's so many variables. There's too much going on.
Vehicles, pedestrians, rain,
there's so
splashes.
many rules, right?
Yeah.
Like stoplights. The reason why we have stuff like Super Cruise or Blue Cruise, these hands-free driver assistance systems on, and they're only available on highways. There's a good reason for that, and it's because it's much simpler to implement. You have to map everything. Here's a great example. So a lot of times I think people think of autonomous as yay or nay, right? Like black and white. Like it's either autonomous or it's not. And there's a huge spectrum of
5
autonomy.
levels.
And so, like, for example, there's level 3 capable, like the Mercedes that both Brian and I have experienced. Those are level 3 on in certain conditions, but say there's certain garages in Germany that have cameras in them and have sensors all over them that they're capable of level 4 inside of a garage. That means that it can drive itself inside of a garage that has a ton of cameras all over it, a ton of sensors all over it. So think of, like, that's where we are to get to level 4. Think of trying to do that to an entire city block. First off, nobody would want that because imagine all the cameras. And nobody wants cameras on every city corner. They're already on every stoplight. So it's just so incredibly complicated. And I think, I'm going over my 30 seconds, but is this a problem? Like, is this a valid solution for? Was this even a problem?
Was it even a problem that now we have an answer for?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think there's other better ways that we can implement autonomy than robotaxis.
I have to agree. And they've been, not only GM, but Ford experimented with it. And I think their program came to an end as well. And
it's just, it's so
expensive. It's expensive, and you just can't outguess what human beings are likely to do in a close environment. Mm-hmm. Before we move on to our viewer questions, I want to let you know we have one more vehicle we're going to talk about. That is the 2024 Ram 1500 Ramcharger. We'll get to it in just a minute because it truly is a most unusual full-size pickup truck. It's even the most unusual full-size EV. But first, we have a viewer question, and this is an email from Meredith. Very short and succinct. Do I need special wheels and tires if I buy an EV? It's a very, very good question, Meredith.
The answer is technically no.
But
you don't have to. But for efficiency, yes.
Brian?
Yeah, the answer is no. You can get harder tires that are more efficient, but there's no need to get those.
The average EV, because it weighs so much, about 1,500 pounds more than a comparable gasoline-powered vehicle, are coming with tires that are designed for that extra weight, and it pretty much inherently makes those tires harder. Mm-hmm. And so you've got a situation where you could substitute out other tires if you wanted to, but it probably wouldn't be wise, and I wouldn't be surprised if you would have trouble finding a tire dealer that would install something other than an EV-specific tire because of liability situations.
A lot of the wheels are more aerodynamic as well.
Mm-hmm.
Anything to cut down on drag.
Yeah.
They put, and like not necessarily the wheel is aerodynamic, but that we see lots of like plastic inserts that like divert air in and out so that they are more aerodynamic.
I haven't seen yet, and I'm sure there's some out there where someone has taken an EV and taken the stock wheels off and put in, 22-inch rims with super low profile tires. But I would think that not only would that be a mistake in efficiency, but they'll wear even less well than they would have on a gasoline-powered vehicle because of the extra weight.
Yeah.
There actually is some concern by some anti-EV folks that tires will not last as long on an EV, and that used up rubber goes somewhere and it's into the environment. So don't be surprised if you read something like that. But my recommendation replacing tires is the same as it is on any vehicle. The first place I would look when replacing tires on a vehicle is at the OEM tire.
Correct, yeah.
Or tire rack. They're not going to sell you something that doesn't belong on your vehicle.
That's very true. But from tire rack, you can get basically, usually, I think almost invariably the OEM tire. Mm-hmm. But you can also get a variety of tires that they have tested, actually done physical testing to know that they are compatible with that vehicle.
Having spent countless hours, I won't say wasted, but on that website, they also, if you try to buy something that they don't think is right, they'll pop up. Are you sure you want this?
And they'll email you too.
Are you sure you want this tire for that vehicle?
There's a lot of confirming that goes on, which I think is a good thing.
They're really a tire resource, much more so than just a place to buy tires.
And one thing we should probably note, if you want to make sure that you get whatever the EPA specified range is for your vehicle, having whatever OEM wheels and tires will guarantee that you can get that. It's not guaranteed. Well, so I don't want to say guaranteed. Right. You can get as close as possible to that number, but there's no guarantee if you change any of that.
And if they're not properly inflated.
That too.
Oh, boy.
Yes. Yeah, that's also a problem.
So our final topic is the third vehicle that we teased at the top of the podcast. Most of us have already seen the all-electric Ram pickup truck. It's called the RAM REV or REV, depending on how you want to pronounce it. Full-size pickup truck. It looks a little bit different than the regular Ram, but it's within the family. It was first shown earlier this year. This time around, though, Ram has done something that I don't think anybody really expected. It's an EV range extender version, and they're calling it the 2025, so that's a production model number, Ram 1500 Ramcharger. And charger is the key word here. And Brian Robinson, why don't you take it from there?
Yeah, you pretty much given most of the details there. They've got an EV pickup with 690 miles of range, but there is a catch. I've often made jokes about buying a Hummer pickup and then towing around one of those big industrial diesel generators to tow it, right? So I'd have unlimited miles. That's essentially what they've done with the Ramcharger. I love that they brought back that name.
It's an excellent name.
Yeah.
Usually it's a bad thing when they bring names back, but couldn't be more appropriate. But there is a Pentastar V6 engine in there, but it is strictly a generator to charge the batteries. There is no connection to the wheels from that engine. As far as the EV credentials, 250 kilowatt front motor, 238 kilowatt rear, 92 kilowatt hour battery, which, just to give you some perspective, like our long-term EV6 GT is a 77 kilowatt hour. Ford's smallest battery is 98 kilowatt, and then the Silverado EV is like 200 kilowatt, I think, kilowatt hour. So it's a small battery, only about 150 miles of range. I think they're shooting for 145, 150 somewhere. They haven't given, obviously, no official number.
But it's still the longest of any vehicle that approaches this type.
But yeah, with that 3.6 liter Pentastar, you can get up to 690 miles. It's very similar to, if you remember, the BMW i3. It was strictly an EV with it was less than 100 miles, like 85 mile range. but you could get a little three-cylinder engine in the back that would then charge the batteries. That's exactly how this Ramcharger works. I think it's awesome. I think it's definitely a bridge to full EVs, and everyone still complains about range anxiety, charger anxiety, however you want to put it. You can basically drive it as an EV or just hit the road and not worry about finding chargers.
Now, it does have a plug.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So a lot of folks have called it a PHEV, a plug-in hybrid vehicle, which Stellantis Ram says is wrong for the reasons you mentioned.
Right. It's not a hybrid vehicle. You don't run off the engine at any point in time. It's strictly an EV with a generator to charge. On the charging, though, max charging is only 145 kilowatt, which is low. We're seeing up to 350 at those high-speed charging stations. So, but at the same time, do you really even need to use those? Mainly just for topping off at home would be plenty. Right?
Yeah, I think this has the capability for fast charging, but I think they're thinking most people aren't going to necessarily care so much about it. They're going to go that 145 miles, let the V6 kick in to start getting the rest of the way. I mean, the specs on this thing are pretty impressive. The fact that it can go 4.4 seconds to 0 to 60.
Yeah, I mean, that's no slouch.
And it's got a 14,000 pound towing capacity. Yeah. So when you look at any half ton, that's pretty impressive.
Right.
I would imagine if you're towing 14,000 pounds, that 145 mile range is decreased substantially. But the point still is that if you're looking for, we've been complaining for a long time about, why aren't we making more headway on range anxiety? Here is an interesting solution. And people will say, well, but you've still got a gasoline engine that's polluting. Well, but think about it. That generator, that V6, is going to run probably at a constant speed. It's not going to be constantly going from 0 to 60 miles an hour or whatever and back again. You're going to be very efficient. You're going to pollute less. All the way around, it's a smart adaptation of internal combustion in an age where a lot of people think it's going away.
Yeah, that in regards to the engine, not throttling up and down, just running. I'm wondering how much it runs? Like, does it wait till you've used all 145 miles and then kick on to charge, or does it keep it like at a constant 50% charge?
We don't know
what I'm
yet.
saying?
Yeah.
So it'd be, because that will greatly affect like the driving experience. A lot of people want the EVs because it's near silent, it's quiet. But if you've got that engine constantly running to maintain like a certain charge rate, it's going to be a different experience for sure.
At 160 miles of range, theoretically you could commute all week long without ever using the gas engine.
I mean, how many times are we, kind of making fun of people who buy a pickup truck and all they do is just like tote around, right, commute without ever actually doing pickup truck things.
Right.
I don't make fun of any pickup truck owners.
Well, maybe I do a little bit. But, I think in rationally for a lot of people, 145 miles, if your commute's 20 miles a day, I mean, that is very reasonable that you would charge it on Monday, or it'd be fully charged on Monday and you'd have to only plug it in on Friday.
And we should point out you'll be able to plug this into your household current without any extra charger.
Yes, but I wouldn't want to. You want a level 2.
Yeah, you would want a level 2.
It's
Think about it, though.
kilowatt
You don't
hours.
have to necessarily have it. It's a big battery,
You
but
don't.
you've
take all weekend
you've
to
got the
charge.
engine to charge it, to keep it charged most of the way.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's one of those
Yeah.
things where if you do want to plug it in, you don't need anything special.
I just can't wait to see people who buy these and then they post like like how many electric range they're using, like what their MPG is. I think for people who are commuting all the time, because I see people with 4xe and stuff like that. It's like if you were only driving under 20 miles a day, which is what that range is, then you're like you're hardly ever turning on the gas engine. Oh, I should mention about oil changes. For this thing. So because we have a 3.6 liter V6, you're going to need, it's going to have its
still
oil
going to
change.
have routine maintenance like any gasoline-powered vehicle.
But the vehicle will keep track of that, right? Because it's like if you drive 10,000 miles, it doesn't necessarily mean that the engine drove 10,000 miles. So the truck will keep track so you can get your oil changes on time.
There's probably at least one or two folks listening today that are saying, well, General Motors, Chevrolet already did that with the Volt. That's not true. The Volt actually was considered a plug-in hybrid because under some circumstances, that engine, which primarily acted as a generator, was connected to the drive wheels.
Yeah.
So it wasn't strictly a range extender EV, even though I thought at the time, and I still think at the time, it was a terrific vehicle.
That's why I mentioned the i3. Cause
the i3 is a parallel vehicle. Yeah. Well, that was fascinating.
I hope we explained that well enough for people.
Oh, I mean, we got a year to talk about it. So that's, but on that point, about a year away until they start actually producing them.
And then we should say that it looks very similar to just a normal RAM.
Well, the updated RAM that's coming
it's going
across
through a
the board.
mid-cycle refresh in 25.
Now, am I correct that they've also? I don't think they've announced it, but it came out in the UAW negotiations. They're going to apply the same technology to the Wrangler.
I don't know.
Maybe they're still negotiating.
All I know
I think I read, and I could be wrong. I don't think so. That they have got plans for this technology in not only the Wrangler, but also in no, it's not the Wrangler. I'm sorry, the Wagoneer.
Oh no, yes,
Wagoneer and Wrangler.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
sorry, not Wrangler.
Yes.
They probably wouldn't have space for it.
I don't think they confirmed anything about it.
No, but it was part of the negotiations.
Yeah, because if you have to keep in mind, I mean, they're built on the same platforms. I think the UAW did spill the beans that they're going to be building a Ram mid-size truck.
They did that as well.
At their what plant is that in Chicago or Illinois?
Oh, is that the in Belvedere?
Yes, where the Cherokee,
the former Cherokee plant, which was a hot button in the negotiations.
So.
Okay, rant and rave time before we wrap things up. Anyone got something that absolutely drives them wacko or that they're very happy about that they see in their everyday driving to work or anything else crosses your mind automotive-wise?
Well, I said last time that I do have a rave. And now I can say it because it had to do with my time in Spain, which I am just I'm so enamored with traffic circles. I think they're the most brilliant invention known to man.
When people know how to use them properly.
Which is why it works in
properly
Spain.
inflated tires, yes.
Which is why it works so well in Spain. Now, I think we were joking because they just put a traffic circle in literally like a mile behind MotorWeek HQ. And we were joking a week or two before that people just like drive through them here.
Over them. They don't even drive around.
Like, what do I do? I don't follow the path of asphalt. I just drive through the brick or the nice. Anyway, no, I think they're really smart. I think when they're used correctly, like Brian said, they just make traffic flow a little bit better.
When they're people know what to do, which is not always the case in our area, and when they're wide, they've got to be wide enough for two vehicles. When they just replace four-way stops with a one-lane circle, they're useless. But when there's enough, because you got to be able to go in and blend, you can't blend in when you have to come to a complete stop and then wait. So within reason, I like circles as well.
Yeah. The one that they just put in behind us is pretty tight.
It's
pretty
very
narrow.
tight. I think we probably get some test vehicles that won't even have a turning diameter that's larger than the circle.
Or like they do like a lot of construction over there. So like if they had like a cement truck or something like that wouldn't, or even the garbage truck, I think is hard. But yeah, I feel like if they just made them a little bit wider,
they've got to be enough to have two cars blend in, one in front of the other.
Yeah.
So that actually turned out to be a rave and a rant.
Yeah. Complex.
Thank you very much. And thanks all of you out there for listening to our podcast today. If you're wondering, you've heard about this television show called MotorWeek. Where can you see it on your local public television station? Well, we make it easy. Please go to our website, motorweek.org. Click on the tab that's on the top of the screen, Watch MotorWeek, and then enter your zip code for the days and times that we are broadcast in your area. Or if you're a cable fan, hop over to our cable partner, MAV TV, their website, mavtv.com, and you'll find our schedule there. You can also stream MotorWeek episodes for free on your mobile device or streaming box by downloading the PBS app. It's available at your device's app store or streaming channel library. And all of the individual road test and feature segments are also available at youtube.com/MotorWeek. In short, if you've got a screen, you can watch MotorWeek. Thanks to Brian Robinson, our podcast producer, Jessica Ray, our audio engineer, David Wainwright, and thanks all of you for being a part of MotorWeek.
You have been listening to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by Auto Value and Bumper to Bumper and TireRack.com. For additional information on podcasts, videos, and showtimes, visit our website at motorweek.org. And watch MotorWeek, television's longest-running automotive magazine series each week on your local PBS station.